Okay, we are back for a second video review from the 8th grade U.S. History STAAR study packet. Make sure you have your packet with you as we go over this, and please follow along. We are on the third page, which says assignment number 4, the American Revolution. Alright, so read the main ideas and see if you can identify the terms in bold, and I'll walk you through that. So Britain's victory in the French and Indian War marked the end of the French Empire in North America. And remember, the French controlled the Mississippi River Valley, and when they went to war with England, the Americans fighting with the English, because that's what they considered themselves, ended up beating France in the New World, and they kicked them out. Now, how do you pay for this? Britain began to tax the American colonists to pay for the debt. So the Stamp Act, the Tea Act, and the Intolerable Acts. The American colonists, though, see taxation as a violation of their rights if the British aren't going to let American politicians into the British Parliament so that they have a say about the taxes. Many Americans begin to organize opposition to British policies, so boycott, which means a group of people decide not to buy something, or a protest. Then there were specific crises like the Boston Massacre, where the British soldiers shot and killed several people from Boston, the Boston Tea Party, where they snuck onto British ships and threw tea into the ocean, and the intolerable acts used to punish the colonists for the Tea Party led to the outbreak of fighting between Britain and the colonies beginning in New England. So the Patriot defeats, that means that the Americans were losing a lot of the battles, but then they had a great victory at Saratoga, and it made a turning point in the war. So France sees these American colonists might just succeed in their rebellion and become independent. And France wants to get in on that action before the end of the war. That way they can say, we helped them. Remember, France had lost the war a couple generations before to England, so they were also looking for revenge. Washington faces a tough winter at Valley Forge in Pennsylvania, but his troops received training, and Thomas Paine wrote a famous tract that kind of motivated them to stick around and see the war through. The British surrender at Yorktown, and the General Cornwallis gives up his army. Britain recognizes the United States as an independent country under the Treaty of Paris in 1783. So now the Mississippi River is the new western border of the United States. What economic policy of Great Britain contributed to the rebellion of the colonists against British policies? This is mercantilism. This is where England is taking raw materials from the colonies back to England. They're using their factories to turn them into finished goods, and then they'll ship them out throughout the British Empire. So they would take lumber and cotton, they would turn it into nice furniture and clothing and sell it back for a profit. What effect did the acts, the Intolerable Act, the Stamp Act, the Tea Act, etc., have on the colonies? It caused the colonists to boycott English products, and eventually it led to rebellion. What was the purpose of Thomas Paine's pamphlet Common Sense? It urged Americans to declare independence from England. What is the main idea of the Declaration of Independence? That King George III has deprived Americans of their rights. It declares independence from Britain and gives the reasons why. List the grievances or complaints against King George. So he took away their rights, he made them quarter troops, and there's a whole big list in there, and you can look that up if you would like. What were the first battles of the Revolution, or the shot heard round the world? Lexington and Concord. Why is the Battle of Saratoga referred to as the turning point of the war? It's where the Americans showed that they had a chance of winning, and the French joined the American side against the English. And what was George Washington's role during the American Revolution? He was the leader and the commander of the Continental Army. George Washington was not president during the American Revolution. That came many years later. All right, an unalienable right is a right that cannot be taken away without due process. And our unalienable rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, let's go to the next page. Major compromises from the Constitutional Convention to the Civil War. So you remember, after the Revolution, we were under the Articles of Confederation, but that was not working very well. So they came back together to try to change that and decided to scrap the changes and just write a whole new document. That's where we get our Constitution. And in this, we have two of the compromises, the Three-Fifths Compromise and the Great Compromise. So first, the Three-Fifths Compromise. Remember, the South had a lot of slaves, and they wanted those slaves counted as people so that they would have more power in the new federal government. And the North opposed this, the South was for this, and what ended up happening is that 3 out of 5 slaves count for the population of representation in Congress. Then we had the other compromise of the Constitutional Convention, the Great Compromise. And this is where small states and big states found a way to exist together. If you think about it, a small state has more power in the Senate because each state gets 2 senators. So a big state like Texas and a small state like Rhode Island both have 2 senators. They're equal. But the bigger states didn't like that because if you have more people, you think you should have more power. And so they have the House of Representatives, which is based on state population. So Texas didn't exist when this was worked out, but let's say Virginia did. Virginia had a large number of people, and so the House of Representatives has more people from Virginia as politicians than Rhode Island, because Rhode Island has a lot less people. Moving on a couple generations later, we have the Missouri Compromise, and this is still over slavery. The North opposed it and the South was for it. And this is to make Missouri a slave state if Maine is entered as a free state. And the 36-30 line, if you were north of that, you were going to be free states, and if you were south of that, there would be popular sovereignty, which means you could choose whether or not you would be a slave state. Compromise of 1850. The North was for it, the South was opposed to it. Remember, this is still about balancing the issue between slave states and free states in the government. California admitted as a free state, but it also created the Fugitive Slave Act, which means that slaves that escaped to northern states had to be returned, and it got rid of slavery in Washington, D.C. All right, more on the fugitive slave law. The North was against it, the South was for it. Northerners had to help catch and return escaped or fugitive slaves to their owners in the South. And the final one that we're going to cover before the Civil War, Kansas and Nebraska Act. The North was opposed to it and the South was for it. It opened up territory for slavery and allowed citizens of the 2 territories the right of popular sovereignty and voting on whether to be free or slave. Alright, and this is the last part we'll cover in this video, Manifest Destiny. What is the definition of manifest destiny? It's a God-given right that Americans have, the divine right to expand from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. So from New York to California. And we studied this picture. I'm not going to go over it in detail, but I will point out a couple things. This picture is called Manifest Destiny. And you can see there's telegraph cables, which represent communication from the east into the west. There's railroads and steamboats, which are improved transportation. And there's technology and education. What 3 things were affected by Manifest Destiny? The Indians, the buffalo, and the land. So, we're going to stop there for this video, and when you have a chance, go on to the third one. Thanks.